Hi there! In this video, we are going to learn about cross-region replication. This is an important topic from the exam's point of view. Then what is a cross-region replication? Well, it is an automatic asynchronous copying of objects from a bucket in one region, which is called as source bucket, to another bucket in another region, which is called as the destination bucket. Note the word asynchronous here. This means that the replication is not done at the real time. It's done asynchronously, and you can expect some delay before you see the replicated objects in the destination bucket. So why is it needed? Well, it is needed if you have an application where you are sending the files from one bucket to another for post-processing. For example, let's say your application lets users upload their pictures and you send those pictures to another region for post-processing or to add a Photoshop effect. Instead of accessing the objects that are across a different region, it is better and faster solution to replicate them to that region and then access them. It is also needed if you simply want to back up the objects in another region, let's say for disaster recovery. Let us see some of the requirements for the cross-region replication. Obviously, the source and destination buckets must be in different AWS regions. Both the source and destination buckets must have versioning enabled. This is a very important point to remember, that the versioning must be enabled on both source as well as destination buckets. S3 must have permissions to replicate the objects from that source bucket to the destination bucket on your behalf. So you will have to create a role to enable S3 to be able to replicate the objects. For a cross-account scenario where source and destination buckets are owned by different AWS accounts, the IAM role must have permissions to replicate the objects in the destination bucket. Now, before we get into the demonstration, it is important to understand what is and what is not replicated. So let's see what is replicated. Any new objects that are created after you add and enable the replication configuration. That means if you have any objects that are already there before turning on the cross-region replication, those objects will not get replicated. The only objects that can get replicated is the one that are added later after adding and enabling the replication configuration. Unencrypted objects as well as encrypted objects are replicated, but only if they are encrypted with server-side encryption with S3 managed keys or server-side encryption with KMS managed keys. If the object in the source bucket was encrypted, the replicated copy of the object is also encrypted using the same type of server-side encryption. This is an important point for the exam. Along with the objects, Amazon S3 also replicates the object's metadata, that is the data about the object itself. Amazon S3 also replicates only objects in the source bucket for which the bucket owner has permissions to read objects and read access control list. This is definitely a no-brainer. The owner needs to have the permissions to read the objects before they can be replicated. Amazon S3 also replicates the tags that are associated with the objects. Now let us see what is not replicated. As I mentioned before, objects that existed before you added the replication configuration will not get replicated. Objects that are encrypted with server-side encryption with customer-provided encryption keys, objects in the source bucket for which the bucket owner does not have permissions, any update to bucket level sub-resources are not replicated. For example, you might change the lifecycle configuration on your source bucket or add notification configuration to your source bucket. These changes are not replicated to the destination bucket. This basically allows you to have different bucket configurations on the source and destination buckets. Finally, the objects in the source bucket that are replicas which were created by another cross-region replication are not replicated. Now let us see how the cross-region replication behaves when there is a delete operation. For general delete request, that is delete without version ID, S3 adds a delete marker which cross-region replication replicates to the destination bucket. However, for the delete with version ID, that means delete on a particular version, Amazon S3 deletes that object version in the source bucket, but it does not replicate the deletion in the destination bucket. In other words, it does not delete the same object version from the destination bucket. This is an extremely important point to remember. Now let us see how cross-region replication works in the AWS console. We are in the AWS console in S3. Go to your bucket, go to properties, ensure that the versioning is enabled. Now click on management, replication, click on add rule. Now here we can configure the cross-region replication on all the contents of the entire bucket, or we can apply that to the objects that begin with certain prefix. Or in other words, we can apply the replication only to a folder containing certain objects. For our demonstration purpose, we will apply to all the contents of our bucket. Now the status here indicates that this rule will be enabled after its creation, or we can just disable it after its creation. That means we'll just create the rule but not enable it. For us, let us enable that. Using this option, you can also replicate the objects that are encrypted with server-side encryption with KMS as the option. For now, let's keep it unchecked and click Next. Let's select our destination bucket. Currently, we do not have any other bucket in another region. So we can create a new one, or using this option, we can select a bucket that belongs to another account. For now, let's create a new bucket in the same account. Let's give it a name. Select a different region. I'm going to select Asia Pacific, that is Mumbai. Now let's say if your application wants to back up the data or the objects and store in a storage class which is a little bit cheaper than the standard S3, you can use this option. So you can change the storage class for the replicated objects, and let's say you select one zone infrequent access, which will be less costly than the standard storage. You can do that. With this option, you can change the actual object ownership to a destination bucket owner. But in our case, both buckets belong to the same owner, so we will not configure this option. Click Next. As I mentioned before, S3 needs to have a role to be able to replicate the objects on your behalf. So let's go ahead and create a role. Just select the Create New Role option and the role will be created for you. Click Next. Now review all the options that we have set up so far and click Save. And there you go. The cross-region replication configuration is created as well as enabled successfully. As it mentions on your screen, the source would be the US East region and the destination would be the Asia Pacific Mumbai region. This cross-region replication will be applied to all the contents in the bucket. The destination bucket is Destination Viz Labs bucket, and an appropriate role is also created. The replicated objects will be transferred to one zone infrequent access storage class. Now let's see if this works properly. Let's go back to our bucket. Let's add a couple of objects to it. Click Upload. Let's go to our destination bucket. Click Refresh if you do not see your objects here. And there you go. The same two objects are replicated and also transferred to one zone infrequent access storage class. Now let's go ahead and change the version of the objects that are in the source bucket. Let's change the version of the sample.txt object. So we'll go to Upload, open this file, and change the content. Save it. Now if you click on the versions and scroll down a little, you can see there are few versions that are created for the sample.txt file. Now let's head over to the destination bucket. Let's refresh it. Click on the versions, and there you go. It has also replicated the latest version of the object. So the cross-region replication has also replicated the latest version of sample.txt. In this video, we learned about a very important topic on cross-region replication. Remember that for cross-region replication, the source and destination buckets must be in different AWS regions and versioning must be turned on both of them. There are certain things that get replicated, such as objects created after turning on the replication configuration, encrypted as well as decrypted objects, objects metadata, and tags associated with the objects, etc. But there are certain things that do not get replicated, such as objects existing before turning on the replication configuration, objects encrypted with the server-side encryption with customer managed keys, or objects that were result of another previous replication. I hope this concept is clear to you. Please read FAQs on this topic for further understanding. I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Hello again. In this video, we are going to have a lot of fun because we are going to set up a static website very quickly using S3 bucket. To set up a simple static website, all you need is two HTML pages at the least. One that acts as an index file or the home page of the website, and the other as the error information page or a 404 page. For those who are new to HTML, let us quickly create those two files. Let us first create index.html. So for that, just open a notepad. We start with creating an HTML tag. Then we will create a header for which the tag is h1. Then we will close the tag using /. And finally, we will close the HTML tag. Just go ahead and save this file. Select type as all files and name it as index.html. Now let us create the error information page. Open the HTML tag, a header tag, give some information to the user, and close the header tag. And finally, close the HTML tag. Now save this file as error.html. Let's close it. To set up our website, let's log in into the AWS console. We have already created a bucket named MyVisLabs bucket. Let's open that and upload the two files that we have just created. Since this website will be publicly accessible, we need to make both these objects as public. Select them, go to More, and click Make Public. Now go to the bucket properties, select Static Website Hosting, select the first option, and just give the name of the index document. Also give the error document name. Now note that the endpoint of our website is going to be this. That means you have to use this particular address to access the static website. Go ahead and save it. Now let us try to access our static website. Go to the option and click on the endpoint. And there you go. We have successfully created our first website, that too very fast. Now let us say if the user tries to access a web page that does not exist on our website. So just give a name like home.html. Now this web page certainly does not exist in our bucket. Instead of showing the 404 page not found, our bucket will now display this error message that was configured in the error.html. In this video, we successfully created a static website, a very simple website using just two HTML web pages. An index.html which acts as the home page for our static website, and an error.html which acts as an error information displayer of our website. Note that it is important to make all these objects as public in order to make them accessible via the web browser. Hi there. In this video, we are going to learn about a fairly recently added option on S3 object, that is select from. And for that, I have directly logged into the AWS console. Let us go to our bucket. Now to learn this feature, we will need to have a CSV file that has at least 10 entries inside it. I'm going to upload a CSV file that has more than 100. My CSV file looks like this. Let's go ahead and upload that CSV file. Click on the file, go to select from. Now as the note says, with S3 select, you can extract records from a single CSV or a JSON file using SQL expressions. S3 select supports gzip compressed files and server-side encrypted files. So basically, it filters the content of an S3 object based on an SQL or structured query language statement. That is, it enables application to retrieve only a subset of data from an object using simple SQL expressions. So here you specify a data serialization format, either JSON or CSV. S3 then uses this format to parse object data into records and returns only the records that match the specified SQL expression. You must also specify the data serialization format for the response. I'm going to select CSV file format. The delimiter is comma. My file does not have a header row, so I'm not going to check this option. The server-side encryption is none. It shows the file size, which is 8 kilobytes. The file is not compressed at the moment, so I'm not going to check this option as well. Now let's go ahead and click on show file preview. It is going to show you first 10 records of the file. Let's click on next. Now here it comes up with a default SQL query. What this is doing is it is selecting all the records from this object, which is the actor.csv file, and it is limiting the query to return only 5 records. That is the first 5 records in the CSV file. So go ahead and run the SQL. And there you go. It has successfully returned the first 5 records from the CSV file. Now let's go ahead and modify this SQL query to return 50 records instead of 5. If you run this SQL, you can see that it has returned the first 50 records from this object. Now you can download this record and if you open, it has successfully downloaded the selected records in this file. That's pretty much what it is. This is fairly a new concept and not very likely to appear on the associate level exam.